Joining us now is Charlamagne Tha God, host of The Breakfast Club and also the author of his latest book, Get Honest or Die Trying. Charlamagne, thank you so much for joining us.
Peace, Cenk, Anna, how we are, man? My favorite news network on the planet.
I love to hear that. I love to hear that. All right. So Charlamagne, look, I appreciated your book, especially because the thesis, the main point that you're making is that we need to engage in deeper conversations in good faith. But I'm curious if, especially following the results of the presidential election, if you have come to terms with and realize that Democrats aren't really interested in having conversations. They're interested in playing the blame game. They're interested in providing cover for the failures of the Democratic Party. That's my take, but I'm curious if you agree with it.
Yeah, I don't like broad generalizations. Even though we do say the Democratic Party, I think there are a few in there that still want to have honest conversations. I just think that some of them got to have the balls to stand up and be able to challenge the party, whatever that may be. Now, I don't even know what the Democratic Party is at this particular moment. They don't have any real leadership. They don't have any real messaging. They don't seem to have a real sense of direction at this point. So now would be as good a time as any to stand up and challenge what was of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, so that's a great point, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here, which is one, challenge what we thought was the Democratic Party. Two is potentially rebuild that party into something that makes sense and can win elections and actually represents their voters, right? So look, I'll break it down into 3 categories, Charlamagne, and then I'm curious, which one you think you're closer to. Nobody has to be in any specific bucket or exclusively in that bucket, but I just want to get your take on it. So one is what we normally call the establishment, right? Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, the people who take tons of corporate donor money. I think, and I'm biasing you a little bit here, but I think they serve the donor class overall. Mainstream media's on their side, etc. Then there's the identitarian left that is a little bit more, you could use whatever terms you like, extreme, radical, max, but hey, look, or identity politics, right? Hey, we need, and have a certain ideology they will not waver from. And then there's a third wing, which is kind of the economically populist wing of Bernie Sanders 2016. So out of those 3, do you think that makes sense as a way of looking at it? And out of those 3, do you associate with one more than the other?
It'll probably be the economy, because I feel like there's nothing that moves in this country that isn't rooted in money. Wu-Tang Clan said cash rules everything around me, and it's a fact. I don't care if you're talking about education. I don't care if you're talking about healthcare. I don't care if you're talking about housing. Whatever it is, it's got to be rooted in the economy. I mean, that's something Bill Clinton coined in the 90s, right? It's the economy, stupid. And I mean, if you look at the main issue people voted for in 2024, it would have to be the same. So if I was rooted in any one of those 3 things, it would definitely be the economy.
Yeah, so let me follow up on that, Charlamagne. So of course I agree, son, and you framed it in a certain way. I get that, right? But New York Times just did a story today about, it turns out that the Democrats lost young males who voted for Bernie Sanders that have now some of them have gone over to MAGA. And that's because of what you just said. It's the economy, stupid. And they said, well, maybe it's sexism, but they keep saying that it's not. What it really is that they're bothered that neither party is actually giving them anything that makes sense economically. And they've got high housing prices, high healthcare prices, high everything prices, and low wages. And that's what's driving them to discontent with the Democratic Party. And that resonated with me. Did that resonate with you?
Absolutely, because when I'm having conversations, the beauty of doing morning radio is that I get to talk to everyday working class people, like every day. And I do a lot of different community initiatives from South Carolina to New Jersey, so I really get to talk to the working class. And I don't get that sense of, hey, we didn't vote for this person because she was a woman. I mean, to be honest with you, I knew more women, it seemed like, who didn't like Kamala Harris than men. Everything was rooted in the economy. I don't care what it was, whether it was, the border, and they were saying that, these illegal immigrants are coming over and getting more resources than people who had been living in these communities forever. Whether it was people who couldn't find jobs, whether it was the cost of groceries, every single thing was rooted in the economy. And I say it all the time, man, what people want in this country is people want to have some money in their pocket and they want to feel safe. That's it. Whoever can provide that will always have the ears of the people.
Okay, I actually want you to elaborate on that further, because I think some of the best moments on the Breakfast Club in this election process was when young black men would call in to explain why it was that they had turned on the Democratic Party. And I find their perspective incredibly important and very interesting. And I feel that they were just kind of left behind by the Democratic Party. And one of the things that would come up over and over again was the immigration issue. And I'm not under the impression at all that these are anti-immigrant individuals, but people living in places like Chicago, for instance, who have seen their resources, which are usually used to nickel and dime the local black community there, essentially be used for the influx of migrants who came in. Federal government run by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris just kind of neglected the issue and allowed these municipalities to struggle with the issue on their own. And the thing that frustrates me, Charlamagne, is that if you are someone who identifies as on the left, regardless of where you fall on that left-wing spectrum, if you have the audacity to bring up this very real issue, well, I mean, you know how Sonny Hostin will treat you if you bring it up on The View, right? And I think that's an issue. I think it's a problem. The Democrats seem to not ever want to do a little bit of self-reflection to understand, okay, what can we do better the next time around? Instead, I see them kind of lashing out and blaming everyone else for the loss. What do you think?
I agree. I was a victim of it. I mean, they lost that battle a couple of years ago. I remember a couple of years ago when Governor Greg Abbott and Governor Ron DeSantis were putting, the migrants on buses and planes and sending them to so-called sanctuary cities. And then, as soon as they got there, those so-called sanctuary cities, they weren't so sanctimonious, were they? They were literally saying, hey, no, send them back. You can't come. And I said back then, I thought that was evil genius. Yes, it was inhumane and cruel to do that, but on the flip side, you did say you were sanctuary cities, and you did say you wanted these people until you got them. And so then when they realized it was an issue and they were saying don't come, it made the Republicans look like they had it right the whole time. I remember earlier this year, January, I was doing exactly what you just did, Anna. I was talking to my activist friends in Chicago, like my homie Zoe, and she was going to city council meetings every week, complaining about what was happening. And it wasn't even just about the fact that, the migrants were coming over. That she was just complaining that they're getting more resources than we are. I had a guy, he works in a parking garage in New York. He saw me one day and he came to me in tears, talking to me about how, there were gangs that were coming over, tearing up his neighborhood. And he was saying he knows it's because the border needs to be closed. This is a black woman I'm talking about and a Spanish man. These people were not MAGA in any way, shape, or form. They were just talking to people about what was going on in their communities. In New York City, Mayor Adams let a bunch of migrants stay in a school overnight and made the kids that went to the school do homeschooling that day because he needed to give the migrants housing for the night. People were calling into the radio station complaining about that. So when I get on the air and I say that, or if I'm in an interview with, I think at the time I was doing an interview with Fox News, and they asked me a simple question: do I think the border is going to play an issue come November? I told them everything I just told y'all. Next thing I know, MSNBC has a headline that says Charlamagne Tha God is spreading MAGA messaging. That is not MAGA messaging, and that is the Democrats dismissing what their base was actually telling them, because they already had labeled the issue of the border a Republican MAGA issue, and it wasn't. It was an American issue, and it was people in their party, people in their base, or used to be in their base, complaining about it, and they didn't listen.
So I have to just follow up real quick on what the gentleman told you about what he's experiencing in his local community. So he says that his community is being torn apart by gangs coming in. Was he credible? Because we've covered similar stories, because I think it's important to give these local communities a voice, and more importantly, allow for the Democratic Party to realize what they're getting wrong to maybe, recalibrate. But when we covered that story, left-wing shows like Majority Report, for instance, said that that's not true. It's completely debunked. There is no problem with migrant gangs coming in. So did you find the individual that was speaking to you credible, or do you think he was just making it up or bought into right-wing hysteria?
He was completely credible. I see him all the time now. Not only was he credible, he wanted me to come with him, to his community. Not only was he credible, he was willing to work with law enforcement, to get these people out of his community. Like he was so credible that, the next time I came to him about following up on some of the things that he said, he didn't want any problems because he was like, I'm about to start working with law enforcement to handle that issue. So it's like, yeah, why wouldn't he be credible? Like, and that's what I mean when I say like we dismiss, these people. Like, why would any Democrat or any media outlet like dismiss this person's claims? Mm-hmm. How about send a field reporter out there and go see for yourself?
Yeah, I love it. So look, Charlamagne, we get along so well because we agree so much, and like you were talking about the busing, on the first day that Greg Abbott started busing folks from Texas to other states, I said, look, it's a smart strategy. And I remember even Anna was surprised that I said that, and everybody was surprised. I'm like, look, we have a undocumented immigrant issue in this country. Why should only the border states deal with it? And if you're sanctuary cities, it makes sense. I don't sanction the way that they did it, et cetera, just like you said, right? So, but we were told to shut that conversation down. Of course, we didn't, you didn't, and that's why we're considered heretics in a lot of ways, and that's why mainstream media oftentimes smear us, et cetera. But I want to go, I say that as a setup to what you talked about in the book, right? Get Honest or Die Lying is the book. And the essence of it is conversations. So you're saying don't do the small talk, do the real talk, right? And so, but on mainstream media, by figures like Joy Reid, it was being spread that, hey, when it comes to Thanksgiving, don't go to Thanksgiving with MAGA family. And either exclude them from your Thanksgiving dinners or don't go to their Thanksgiving dinners. I think that's super harmful to the country because then we're going to get into our different tribes and never talk to each other and begin to see each other as enemies. I'm curious what your take on it is.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's one of the most ridiculous conversations because when people were telling me over the last couple of years that they were leaning towards Trump or they were leaning towards the Republican Party, I didn't, shut them down. I didn't tell them that they're wrong. I asked a simple question, and that question is why. And I remember having a conversation with Larry King a long, long time ago, and he always told me the most important question to always ask is why. And so when I started asking why is when I started to understand, what people were wanting to vote for him for. And they weren't voting for him because, they love him or he's some beloved figure. They were voting for him because they just thought he was better on these issues, which is the economy and the border. And another reason I think that's just a ridiculous, thing to say is because, man, yes, I voted for Vice President Kamala Harris. As we all know, there are millions of people in this country who say that they're funding a genocide, like who can't stand the fact that they give so much money, to Israel's military. I would hope that my Muslim brothers and sisters, my Arab brothers and sisters, don't hate me or don't ever want to speak to me because I voted, for the Democratic Party, and I know that they're so against the Democratic Party and how they support Israel's military. So it goes both ways, is what I'm simply saying. You may not like Trump supporters for something, and guess what? There's people who don't like you for who you chose to vote for as well.
Yeah, Charlamagne, I just think if we're going to live in a system that values the democratic process, we have to respect that people are going to come to their own conclusions about which candidate is the best for them. And so I didn't vote for Kamala Harris. I also didn't vote for Donald Trump. I had a deep issue with the Israel question and what's been happening with the US government funding, the absolute terror that's taking place in Gaza. Earlier it was in Lebanon, now there's a very weak ceasefire in place, but you get the picture. But I don't begrudge you for voting for Kamala Harris, right? That was the right decision for you. And the thing that I actually take much deeper issue with is the culture on the left in general that essentially tells people to bubble yourself away from anyone who disagrees, which leads to less understanding. I think in order to be a strong party, you need to understand what motivates people to vote for the other side. What are the arguments? What is the other side doing that seems to be appealing to voters? And this like weird willful ignorance, this culture of willful ignorance on the left has led to the demise of the left, and people seem to be unwilling to accept that. I don't think that the majority of American voters on the other side are bad people at all. I want to understand them, and I want us to all respect each other and respect the decisions we make for ourselves in this democratic process. But by opening up dialogue and conversations, I think that it would actually allow the Democratic Party to maybe realize that they've done things in a way that is not appealing to American voters, and they need to recalibrate some of their policies. But again, that would take some humility, that would take some self-awareness. And for some reason, I don't know, the party, the establishment members of the party have really moved away from that. That's more of a common question. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's why they lost, Anna. They lost because they put themselves in a bubble, and they put themselves in such a bubble and such an echo chamber that they don't even know what people outside of that bubble and echo chamber are talking about. I was having this conversation with them. I was saying that, man, and I was saying it publicly too. I said, I feel like a lot of the energy and the enthusiasm that exists for the vice president is largely within the party. It's largely within that bubble. I don't necessarily feel it, when I'm out and about. And now that we got more things to compare it to, I remember saying, this don't feel like President Obama in 2008. This feels more like, Hillary Clinton in 2016. I was saying that. And I even heard Gavin Newsom on his podcast. He said the same thing. He said they were out on their governor's tour. And, it was, him and Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Governor Josh Shapiro, Governor Wes Moore. And he said they were going to all of these curated events, right? So they would pull up to these places that, Democrats had, like barbershops that they had already, scoped it out, had the people that they wanted in there, going to these curated rallies. And he was like, that's still our bubble. So they weren't aware of what was going on outside of the bubble. And not knowing what was going on outside of the bubble is what caused them to lose, if you ask me.
So, Charlamagne, again, that's a similarity that your show has with our show, which is that you take callers, we get tens of thousands of comments every single day on YouTube, social media, etc. So we have this umbilical cord to the audience, and allows us to see where it's going. And so both of us were trying to warn them, hey, your base is slipping away from you. And they thought we were the heretics, that we were we were the ones trying to warn you that you're going in the wrong direction. But I see some upsides too in what the core of the complaints were, right? Which is the economy and the border. So yeah, Trump can take that in a very bad direction, but at least like it wasn't that racism and sexism got him elected. It was the economy and the border, right? And sometimes there's some of those things cross over, etc. But this idea that the establishment, Democrats and media has that, no, the other side is just evil, so I guess evil won, is absurd. It's totally absurd. That's because they refuse to listen to their base, to actual voters, etc. And that's because almost everyone else in media is elitist, right? And so they view like talking to a real person or a populace as like some sort of crime against humanity or media, etc. And so it's leading them astray. Anyways, that's a long setup too. So now that Trump is in office, and the brother likes being popular, right? So there are some potential significant downsides of Trump administration, and maybe some potential upsides, right? Because of that thirst to be popular and maybe fix the things that got him elected, the economy, the border, etc. So what is the thing that you think might be a surprising upside of the Trump administration? And what is the thing you're most worried about with the Trump administration?
Well, there's a few things that I think there's a few things that could be upsides. Number one, he could want to just prove all his political opponents wrong. So for, everybody that was out there, including myself, who were calling him a fascist and, an authoritarian. And, and we weren't saying these things for no reason. We were saying these things because of the things that were coming out of his mouth. But he may want to just prove everybody wrong. And I mean, he's in a position right now where he's got control of, all the branches of government. We know the Supreme Court is his, right? And you play around, Alito and Thomas will probably retire. Sotomayor is doing the typical Democrat thing and being stubborn and not moving. So he'll probably end up getting to add another, Supreme Court justice. But that's a lot of power, right? So when you have all of that power, your people are expecting you to govern. And I mean, we haven't seen Republicans, govern for the people. In my lifetime, I can't even think if ever, right? So I think that, we could be in a situation where 18 months after, inauguration, if he implements those tariffs, the prices of goods could be so through the roof that everybody that went out there and voted for him on the economy, they're gonna be pissed off at him and they're gonna flip on him. But the reality is, are the Democrats in position to even recover that fumble that could happen? Because I mean, that's the biggest downside I see. The biggest downside I see is that so many people went out there and voted for, the economy, and he may not deliver on that. Just because if you look at what any economist says, those tariffs are going to be terrible for our country. So that's the biggest upside is that he has so much power, but also the biggest downside is that he has so much power, because if he actually delivers for the American people and they start to feel more relief, in their pockets, and they start to feel, more secure in their neighborhoods, man, the Republican Party could be in power for a very, 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 very long time. But if he doesn't do those things, it could be very short-lived. But are the Democrats even in position to recover that fumble? I don't think so.
Yeah, man, it's remarkable how much we agree. Yeah. I mean, we normally do tough interviews, but we just keep on agreeing because, yeah, the fact that he wants to be popular could be a real force for good. And I don't think that almost anyone else on the Democratic side recognizes that yet, other than Bernie Sanders and Ro Khanna. And yeah, and his obsession with wanting to be, have as much power as possible can lead in a very bad direction. But I also agree with you, Charlamagne, that in order for the Democrats to pick up that fumble, first they got to let go of the donor cash. As long as they're just holding on to the donor cash as tightly as they can, they're never going to be able to pick up a Republican fumble, because they're too obsessed with, what do the billionaires want, and I got to serve the billionaires. So if it's that party is not interesting. So they better turn the F around before they hit another iceberg and another one, because then otherwise we're just stuck with the Republicans, and that's a terrible place to be. We need two vibrant parties.
The Young Turks Network is the only network I ever hear talk about the Democrats in the donor class. I mean, I've heard Bernie Sanders say it, but it feels like nobody. I don't never hear this on CNN. I never hear this conversation on MSNBC. I only hear it on the Young Turks Network, and I feel like, somebody needs to start bringing. I mean, Bernie does. Bernie definitely brings those conversations to those networks. Yeah. But somebody really needs to start having that conversation with them in a real way, because to the point that y'all always make here, the people are going to always rebel against the establishment. And one form of messaging, that Donald Trump has had since 2016, and I don't know how the country, has been convinced that a white male billionaire is somehow for the people, but he has convinced them of it, and he said he's going to drain the swamp, and he says that we need to, get rid of establishment politics, and they've bought into it, and the Democratic Party has been put into a corner and painted in the corner as being the establishment party who is beholden to the donor class.
Yep.
And that is a very, very, very hard tag to shake once you're labeled that.
Charlamagne, we always love having you on, love the conversation, and keep doing what you're doing. I love when you go on other shows and you speak your truth. Everyone check out his book, Get Honest or Die Trying, Why Small...
Die Lying.
I'm sorry.
That's the twist.
Die Lying, my bad. Why Small Talk Sucks. It's an excellent book, and I, again, really do appreciate the message that you're trying to put out there with this book. Charlamagne, thank you again. Hope you come back soon.
Thank you for having me. I love y'all, man. I love the Young Turks. Y'all are the best cable news platform on the planet today. If you want truth, you come to the Young Turks.
Thank you, Charlamagne.
And everybody check out Breakfast Club too. Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.